Today we're going to talk about the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula works if we're given ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0. So if we're looking up here, we have an ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0. Then we know the answer for x is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. The stuff in the square root in the radical is what we call the discriminant. The discriminant here is the b squared minus 4ac. So what's inside the radical is called the discriminant. If the discriminant is positive, you're going to get 2 real answers. If the discriminant is 0, you're only going to get 1 real answer. And if the discriminant is negative, then you're going to get 2 imaginary answers. So let's try some practice. Example 1 here, A. We have x squared minus 4x minus 7 equals 0. So we go ax squared plus bx plus c. So then that equals 0, therefore we can use the quadratic formula. We know a is 1 because you don't see a number, so you assume it's a 1. B is negative 4 because of the minus. And c is negative 7, once again because of the minus. So all we do is take all that, plug it in, and simplify using the quadratic formula. So the opposite of b. So if b is negative 4 here, the opposite of b is positive 4, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is negative 4 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 7. All that goes in the radical, and we divide by 2 times a, 2 times 1. So all we did was plug it in, and this is what x equals. So now we just simplify what's inside the square root. You could type all that stuff in, negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 7 in your calculator to get an answer. Since I don't have my calculator, I'm just going to do the math. So negative 4 squared is 16. And negative 4 times 1 times negative 7 is actually a positive 28. And then you divide it by 2 times 1, which is 2. So once again, this is what x equals. Now I actually have to do the 16 plus 28. So I get 4 plus or minus the square root of 44 divided by 2. And now I have to do the factor tree for the 44. I know factors are 4 and 11, 4 factors to 2 and 2. So we have a pair of 2's with a leftover 11. Don't use the 4 because it factored further. So the 44, the radical 44, is going to actually factor into 2 radical 11. And then we have a 4 plus or minus 2 radical 11 divided by 2. And because the 3 numbers outside the radical are all even, we can reduce them. So we would divide 2 on all 3 of these numbers. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So the answer, when we reduce it, will be 2 plus or minus 1, which I don't need the 1, in front of the radical 11. And then I don't actually need to put it divided by 1 because that's just 2 plus or minus radical 11. Same thing. So let's try the second example, B. So with B, we don't have it equal to 0 like the formula tells us we need to. So the first thing I'm going to do is add 3 to both sides to make it equal 0. So I'll get x squared plus 5x plus 3 equals 0. Now I could use the quadratic formula because I have it equal to 0. A is the number in front of the x, which is 1, in front of the x squared. B is the number in front of the x, which is 5. And C is just the number without the x, that's 3. So now we're going to plug it into the quadratic formula here. The opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. So the opposite of b is negative 5, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 5 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 3, all divided by 2 times a, which is 1. And this is going to be what x equals. And then we just do the math. Try to figure out what's inside the radical sign. So you could type all that in your calculator and just figure it out. Once again, I don't have my calculator, so I'm going to do the math. 5 squared is 25. Minus 4 times 1 times 3 is minus 12. And that is all divided by 2 times 1, which is 2. And then I go one step further and do 25 minus 12, which is 13. And now I would try to do the factor tree, but the only factors of 13 are 1 in itself. So at this point, I cannot go any further. So this is my answer for x. So x equals negative 5 plus or minus radical 13, all divided by 2. And if you look at the last example, the 2 plus or minus radical 11, that should have equaled x. So if we look at example D, the first thing we have to do is get the x squared and the 9 on the other side. So I'm going to subtract x squared. I'm going to subtract 9. The x squared and the 9 will cancel out on the right. 3x squared minus x squared is 2x squared. X is positive, minus 9. I can't combine them, so I just put x minus 9. And that equals 0. Now I got to figure out what a, b, and c are. So a is 2. B is the number in front of the x, which is 1. And c is negative 9. So we just plug it into the quadratic formula. So x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. So now we just do the math inside the radical sign. So negative 1 plus or minus 1 squared is 1. Negative 4 times 2 times negative 9 is actually positive 72. And that's all divided by 2 times 2, which is 4. And 1 plus 72 is 73. So we get the square root of 73. So x equals negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 73, all divided by 4. And I would check the factor tree for 73, but it does not factor. Therefore, that is our answer. Let's try discriminants. If we wanted to find the discriminant to see how many solutions there are, all we have to do is b squared minus 4ac. This right here will tell us whether there is 2 positive or 2 real numbers, 2 imaginary numbers, or just no solution at all. So it's just like the last one where I needed the ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0, which I have. So now I just do the b squared, which is negative 12 squared, minus 4 times a times c is 18. And then I just do the math. So when I do negative 12 squared, I get 144. When I do 8 times 18, we get 136. And we subtract 144 minus 136. And that gives us 8. And since 8 is a positive number, because this is positive, there are actually going to be 2 solutions for x here, 2 real solutions. And that's how I can figure that out. So if I look at example C, and I did b squared minus 4ac, b is negative 6 squared minus 4 times a is 1 times c is 8. And I just do the math. Negative 6 squared is 36. 4 times 1 times 8 is 32. And 36 minus 32 is 4. Therefore, there's 2 real solutions.